Good evening and welcome to what will be a very interesting panel discussion. Now, 50 years of independence certainly comes with a lot of history, a lot of predictions, and a lot of reflection about our current state as the nation of Zambia. And in those 50 years, we have come about partnerships, cooperations with other member states as well as delegations. And tonight, we are actually interviewing a number of representatives from member states as well as in particular the EU delegation. Before we introduce our panelists, we would like to say that we are going to inform you both about past as well as present, and we're also going to take a look at current initiatives, policies, as well as predictions for the future when it comes to the bilateral cooperation between Zambia and European member states as well as the European delegation. We will start with the European Union head of delegation in our welcomes. Welcome to you, Ambassador Hervio.
Thank you, Chi. Let me first say that I'm very happy to be here with the 7 EU ambassadors present in Zambia now, and to be part of this Jubilee celebration.
Well, certainly it is a Jubilee celebration that we are looking forward to and currently in the mood of, but it's also a particularly special week for Europe, isn't it?
Yes, thank you very much for telling this. Tomorrow it's the 9th of May, and tomorrow it's a celebration day for us. We celebrate the declaration of Robert Schuman, done only 5 years after the terrible war that we had in Europe, the Second World War, to make an appeal to move toward integration, European integration. And this was very courageous, very risky, but it's opened the way of what we are now. We moved from 6 countries to 28 countries now. And what we have done, it's not only economic, it's not only social, it's not only trade, it's also to build between us common value. And I think we will have the opportunity to come back on this during this event.
Well, certainly we will, and the evolution of the bilateral partnerships that have taken place will be elaborated on. We'd like to now welcome our representatives from the member states. We will start with the High Commissioner from the United Kingdom. Good evening and welcome, High Commissioner Thornton.
Good evening, Chi, and good evening to everybody who's watching this program. It's a great pleasure to be here and to be discussing this topic in Zambia's 50th year. And we certainly in the British High Commission are very much looking forward to celebrating the anniversary along with Zambia. We've been working with and in support of Zambia right from the beginning since independence, and we have a very big and growing program of cooperation now. In the early days, it was very much about building buildings, schools and hospitals, and also supplying professionals to help the new country of Zambia, teachers, doctors, also civil servants. My uncle was here in 1968 for a year.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting that you had an uncle here that far back.
Absolutely. He was here for a year working on a survey of the country to assist in mapmaking.
Okay. Right.
And I understand that for a long time the Secretary to the Cabinet here was a Brit, and I gather he was known to be a really tough manager who insisted on holding to account all those civil servants who he thought weren't delivering.
All right.
But anyway, things have moved on since then, and we no longer provide personnel in quite that way. We operate much more in support of the government's own efforts, and I think that's right. We operate in 4 broad areas. One of those areas is that we contribute funds directly to the budget of the government of Zambia, direct budget support.
All right, and certainly we will hear more about that. We'd also like to welcome to the panel our ambassador from Germany. Thank you very much, the ambassador from Germany, Ambassador Fink. Welcome to the show.
Good evening, Chi. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's also for me a great pleasure being here tonight. 50 years, long history. Also long history for Germany and Zambia. We also have been here for the very first day And in these past 5 decades, our agenda has included almost everything: political relations, economy, cultural relations, foreign policy issue. We like to lend our expertise to Zambia, assist the people in the fight against poverty, but it's also about looking where can we learn from Zambia when it comes to defining Germany's African policy. Zambia in many ways is a best practice case in our view when it comes to peace and stability, democracy. So we try to make our relationship a win-win situation.
Well, certainly it does actually mean a lot when we say bilateral, and it's interesting that you say Germany can learn something from Zambia. We'll be finding out further details about how you feel the bilateral relations have gone, and certainly welcome to the program. Would also like to welcome the ambassador from Italy, Ambassador Daco. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good evening. It's a real pleasure to be here tonight and to have the opportunity to recall briefly the presence of Italy in this country. Presence that dates back to before independence. And the most visible example of the presence was the construction of the Kariba Dam between 1956 and 1960. But the government of Lusaka, the newly independent state, was given access to credit aid and grants for the development of its infrastructure, paving the way for Zambian Italian company to forge a joint venture in many sectors. Numerous have been development cooperation program of Italy in Zambia in sectors like health and education, agriculture, industry, infrastructure. The deeply rooted Italian presence here is proved by just let me recall some example of the construction, engineering construction in the country. The TANZAM for the transport of goods between Zambia and Tanzania. The agreement at the time until the early 80s between Alitalia and Zambian Airways for the leasing and maintenance of the aircraft. The Tazama pipeline and also the Indeni refinery were built by Italian companies.
And that is definitely a wide spectrum, because you've also touched on aviation, which is something that is a current topic. So certainly we will be finding out more about the Italian cooperation here in Zambia. We'll come back to the EU head of the head of delegation, Ambassador Hervio. Care to tell us a bit about your involvement over the past 50 years with the nation of Zambia?
Thank you very much. As you have understand, member states have bilateral head, but they believe that sometimes it's useful also to put the money in common and to support international organizations. Member states are supporting World Bank, IMF, all the UN agencies, and we are the main donors in the world.
Right.
But at some stage we believe that it should be useful also to have our own instrument, European Development Fund.
Right.
And that's what we are managing at the EU delegation. We have moved also to other dimensions of our work, trade, political, but I think people remember what we have done in this country.
Right.
Lusaka, Kabwe, road, rehabilitation. Zimba Livingstone is also something which is very appreciated by
and all that
everybody.
culminating, by the way, in being the largest contributing partner with the Zambian government. That's no easy task.
I think it's important to say that all together we are the biggest donor to Zambia, by far.
Right.
And we have financed, I think, 2 billion euro since with EU, not without taking into account member state support.
Right.
So we are by far the first donor. What is important is also that to understand that what we are giving is grants. It's not loans. You have government of Zambia has not reimbursed that we have seen now a number of financements of infrastructure are loans, but we give grants.
Okay. Now, you did mention member states, and would like to welcome the representative from another member state representing France, none other than the French ambassador, Ambassador Bourdin. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I am very proud to be here among my colleagues to mark the celebration of the 9th of May, the EU Day. As you know, France is a founding member of the European Union, as well as a permanent member of the UN Security Council, and we are convinced of the benefits of multilateral cooperation to protect peace and security, promote democracy and human rights as a necessary basis for the development of countries and individuals. That's on this basis that we consider that the UN has a huge role to play, economically, politically, and we share with Zambia since 50 years, because our ambassador, the first one, Mr. Salad, was here on the 24th of October 1964 to mark the independence of Zambia.
Right.
We've been working on those three pillars, political, cultural, and economic, since inception, and I'm just in the line of the work of my predecessors.
All right. Well, certainly when it comes to those three pillars, as you've put it, we will be taking a look at some of the practical examples as well. And here to elaborate on the cooperative efforts and involvements of the Swedish government, we have the Swedish ambassador, Ambassador Lena. Ambassador Lena, welcome to the panel.
Thank you very much, G, and good evening to everyone. It's very nice to be here and to be able to speak to you and direct ourselves to a larger audience so that they can know, you can all know a little bit more about our countries, but also about the relations with Zambia. I remember when I arrived in Zambia the last week of October of 2011, and how I was surprised at the same time as I was not surprised of being able to speak Swedish to quite a few people. One of those persons was actually your Minister of Finance, Alexander Chikwanda.
All right.
And another one is actually your former President, Rupia Banda.
All right.
And those are two people who benefited from a large, continuous and long support from the Swedish government and the Swedish people in solidarity with the liberation struggles in Southern Africa, with all countries. And as we know, Zambia played a special role in this quest to give space, to give refuge for those people, for those freedom fighters that could not be in their own countries, that they could be here in Zambia, they could speak freely, they could express their views, and they could continue their struggle. And Zambia had a very important role to play, did a very important job at that time, and Sweden supported that.
And of course, in line with the 50 years of independence, Zambia hailed in the region as a beacon of peace, a beacon of democracy. So it is very interesting that Sweden should actually recognize those efforts, and we'll be finding out more about how your cooperative efforts to spur and maintain this have been effective. We'd also like to welcome our next member on the panel, the ambassador from Finland. Welcome, Ambassador Antinen.
Thank you very much. It's really a great pleasure to be with all of you tonight in this program. Finland is also an old friend of Zambia in development and in other areas of cooperation, political and economic. We came here, the first diplomats came here in 1972 to set up an embassy, and like Sweden and other Nordics, we really wanted to support Zambia going through a very difficult times at the time in terms of the wars in the region and so on. Since then we have been here and actually covered a lot of different sectors in the country's development. If I look a little bit back to the history, I think we started with forestry cooperation. We helped Zafiko to set up the plantations of trees in copper belts. We helped the sawmilling industry to develop, and there are still Finnish-made sawmilling mills from the 70s and running.
That you can see,
shows
yes,
the quality of the technology at the time. We were involved in road building. Some of the roads still are there in quite good conditions, built then by the Finnish companies. Also electrification, and also some of the viewers may remember the scissor trucks that were given to the councils.
Of course,
the famous
of course.
scissor trucks that the president actually remembers very well.
Well, certainly, and we look forward to hearing about more practical examples, and we will be getting into those as this evening's panel discussion progresses. And rounding off our panel of representatives, we would like to welcome the ambassador from Ireland, Ambassador O'Brien. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Chi, and good evening. Ireland has a very long relationship with Zambia that goes back prior to independence, and I know many people will be familiar with the work of Irish missionaries here in country and the contribution that they made and still make to the social sectors, to health and education. But just prior to independence, in 1963, we had visits to Ireland by Dr. Kawanda and also by Honourable Sigotowina. And really what they were doing was preparing for independence, and realised that there were going to be severe shortages of qualified personnel in the public service. And so we had Irish doctors, nurses, other professionals coming to Zambia at that time. And as I visit various parts of Zambia, I'm still meeting with some of those people who came out at that time and stayed on here in Zambia. But also at the same time, there was a request for Ireland to help in capacity development, training of people, of medical personnel, but also training of people in local government and in central government. And Ireland has continued to cooperate with Zambia over that 50-year period.
Well, we look forward to another 50 years, not only from the Irish government, but of course all the represented member states, and of course the delegation as a whole. When we return, we'll be taking an in-depth look at some of the sector-related questions that I'm sure a lot of people have out there for the European Union as well as its member states. We'll also be finding out what is the prediction of EU member states and the delegation in the next 50 years. All this and more on the other side. Good evening and welcome back to this panel discussion. As we mentioned in our introduction, on the other side, we are sitting down with members of European states, representatives, as well as the representative from the European Union delegation as a whole. Now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for your time. Very busy schedule, so we do appreciate your time. We would also like to get some insight when it comes to a number of topics and questions. Let's begin with the fact that all of you in your introductions have given very practical examples of how you have cooperated with the Zambian government over the 50 years, historical reference, current reference, but how does one actually decide as a nation, as a delegation, what policies of the Zambian government you will align yourself with? How does one prioritize your efforts? And for that question, I'm going to throw it up in the air, but certainly a lot of people would like to know, how do you select what to focus on?
It's always tough to prioritize because there is always a lot of things that one could do, and so I think one has to look at the areas where one can make most difference with limited resources. We all of us put a lot of money into our cooperation programs. We certainly do, 700 million kwacha a year. But even so, compared to the total spend of the government of Zambia, that's not an enormous amount, and so we try to find ways where we can make most difference. And in the past, we've given a lot of money directly to the Zambian budget. We still do that, but we're focusing now on three other broad areas. One is improving the lives of ordinary Zambians in health, education, and we've supported the program of social cash transfers, which the government is ramping up very substantially, and I think that's a very good and very cost-effective way of relieving the poverty of the poorest people. But we're also helping the government to restructure itself so that it can deliver its services better, more effectively to ordinary Zambians by, for example, reform of the civil service. And lastly, we're looking at unlocking the economic potential of ordinary Zambians. For example, small farmers, small businessmen who want to grow their farms, grow their businesses in order to become profitable, productive, and increase the overall economic growth of the country.
All right, well, certainly interesting that you did talk about agriculture. When we looked at the sector of agriculture, a lot of the member states represented here today cooperating with Zambia on agricultural projects. What is the future of that? Will it still be an aid? Will it still be an aid effort, or will it be more of a trade effort? Because of course, agriculture, a huge industry when it comes to international trade. How are you planning on cooperating with the Zambian government when it comes to the agriculture sector? I'll take your contribution there, Ambassador Lena.
Yes. No, I think that maybe we should backtrack a little bit first. Because when you ask us the question about alignment, about prioritization, which is a difficult word to say in English, then we also have to think, what are we talking about? Bilateral relations are broad. That means relations between countries, not only governments, between peoples, between institutions. So what is it we are talking about? We have talked here, mentioned words such as partnerships, collaboration, you have institutional exchanges, you have trade. So we should first recognize that the bilateral relations are very broad between all our countries and Zambia.
Right.
And then when we talk about this specific issue, are we then talking about the development cooperation programs that our countries and the EU that we together support in support of Zambia? And
Right.
of course, those programs, they always take their point of departure in the Zambian government's plans, in the national plans for the poverty reduction, the national development plans, the 6th revised development plan and so on. Those are the points of departure. And we all together with Zambia have subscribed a number of instruments that have come out of international meetings where we say that we should inform each other, we should try to work together, we should try to use the national systems, and we should try, because this is a cooperation towards a cooperation and a support towards the development
Right.
of Zambia.
Right.
So that's my first part.
Okay.
Can I continue?
Yes, indeed, you can.
Because you really
I do like that point on development. I do like that point on development. Yes, moving
I
on to
think that we need kind of to clarify that what we are talking about.
All right.
When it comes to agriculture, we also have to look, when we look at our development cooperation supports in the area of agriculture. Agriculture has been identified by Zambia, and we know worldwide that it could be a substantial area for job creation. It could be have an even greater impact on the economic development, and an even greater impact on the improvement of the livelihoods of many people.
Okay.
Still 60% of the population of Zambia, they live in rural area, and many get their incomes from the agriculture sector. A little bit of what the support that Sweden is doing is trying to facilitate that the market actors in agriculture also see that small-scale farmers is an important market.
Right.
So instead of trying to connect the big private companies, the majority of them, I think maybe all of them, Zambian companies, to discover this part of the market and to see how they can work. They may not be used to working with the small-scale farmers. So what can we do to support that this market opens up, so that the market also includes the small scale, and they can also benefit from a bigger market when it comes to agriculture.
Okay,
That's just one example.
Yeah, which is certainly an interesting example. We'll hand over some time to Ambassador.
Now all of us want to speak.
Yes.
Well,
Thank you very much. I also want to address first the first question about the priorities, and obviously this is a consultative process between the governments, but also other stakeholders. Private sector development, and private sector development, I think that is the core for the Zambia's future. If you don't have big enough private sector, no jobs are delivered, or no substantial amount of jobs are delivered, on a sustainable basis. there's no exports from Zambia, and so on and so on. So the private sector is the core, and that's why we want to partner not only with the government. We are supporting the government's private sector development reform program, which tries to create conducive environment for private businesses, but also with other stakeholders such as Zambia Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises Association and others, like Simba and Zambia Association of Manufacturers. So it's a kind of multi-stakeholder approach.
Okay.
We also provide budget support, which I think has been a very instrumental tool for our dialogue with Zambian government, and also like initiatives like social cash transfers, because we also should not forget the poorest of the poor in this country. Poverty is a big challenge. But in terms of agriculture, I want to bring one point here, which I realized when listening. Actually, I was attending the Africa Development Bank 50th anniversary celebration, so they also celebrated 50 years of Jubilee year. And I realized that Africa's population will double, maybe double in 30 years. So there's actually a big challenge how to feed all these people, including Zambia, where the population will also double maybe in the next 30 years, which is something we have to keep in mind.
Now you mentioned poverty reduction, which no doubt is a very broad topic. It's a very general term, and all your member states have specific engagements that are aiming to actually induce poverty reduction, and in fact poverty alleviation is what Zambia is actually working towards. We'll ask you, Ambassador Finka, how has your government actually aligned itself with the efforts on poverty reduction?
When it comes to defining priorities here, the main question for us is always what is needed in Zambia and where do we have the expertise. So it's not imposing any programs or trying to enter into an open dialogue with the Zambian government. And when we discussed these questions many years ago, we came up with two projects, two focal areas to assist in the fight against poverty or poverty alleviation. One is improving access to water and sanitation here in the country. It is not widely known that in Africa more people are dying from diseases due to a lack of access to water and sanitation than from malaria, HIV, AIDS, and tuberculosis.
Those are alarming but very real statistics.
So it's a very important sector, and we have been working on that for many years now, and we can see results, substantial results. It's a success story, but much more needs to be done.
All right.
And the other area when it comes to poverty reduction is what we're doing to improve local government, decentralization, because the people in the districts and the provinces, they know best what the people really need. So we're trying to improve that as well. Local government, bringing government and decision closer to people.
Ambassador Hevio, can we please get your contribution? Let's get you in on this conversation.
Thank you very much. I think that as everybody here, we don't do anything from our side. Unilaterally, we have discussion with the government, with civil society, private sector before deciding, and it's always difficult. But we are looking at three pillars: growth, poverty reduction, and governance. Growth, because without growth you cannot expect. And I think Zambia has been very good in growth, but we will continue to support growth, supporting agriculture, because agriculture is an area of potential growth for this country, taking into account the needs of the future on the world, not only in Africa, but on the world.
Right.
Energy also, because Zambia has land and water, and this is the pillar of growth.
All right.
Poverty reduction, we will continue to support health, because there is a number of challenges, as this has been said, but also agriculture, because the poverty is mostly in agriculture area. 85% of the agriculture are under poverty line. So this is a big challenge, and I think this is still a big challenge for Zambia after 50 years.
All right.
And good governance is also crucial, because if you don't have good governance, and this has been said very clearly by the President at the last EU-Africa Summit, President Sata said that without governance, good governance, we cannot expect to have growth. So governance, good governance, is also an area where we try to support the government. So we are looking at every time at these three pillars.
All right. Well, certainly there is synergy, I mean, amongst the host nation being Zambia, as well as the represented member states and the delegation. We get a sense of synergy, we get a sense of cooperation in its truest sense. Sustainability, all well and good that there is synergy when it comes to areas of focus and policies, but how do we actually maintain some of the things that are implemented? Sustainability. Ambassador O'Brien, care to answer that question?
Yeah, for me, a lot of this comes back to partnerships and really genuine partnerships. And we would see the importance of having partnerships at different levels, obviously with central government, with local government, and directly with communities. And for example, we've had an involvement in Northern Province going back over 30 years. And I worked there myself back in the 1990s. And going back now and seeing the impact of some of those programs in areas like water and sanitation, in areas like improved health infrastructure, in areas like education infrastructure, and just seeing that we can still see the impact of that many years later. But I think that goes back to the type of relationships that were built up with central government here, with local government, and with communities. I think if you get that right, then you will see that there is sustainability. But I think, of course, the danger always with international development is having ideas that are not really owned either by the communities or by the local government.
Right, right. I would like to get Ambassador Dako in on this conversation. With all these pillars, we did actually talk about these three pillars. What do you think has been the evolution when we talk about from aid to trade? I mean, I've heard these lines mentioned by various member states. How would you define that, from aid to trade? What does that mean to the average Zambian watching out there?
Yeah, first of all, let me associate to my Irish colleague to underline the importance of the incredibly valuable and silent contribution of Italian missionaries and clergymen. But as you say, the evolution from aid to trade is really important. Now is a well recognized, but everyone in the world, the best way to cooperate, to promote development in a country is to promote partnership and the transfer of know-how and the formation of labor force and skills capacity. And I would like to take this opportunity, because we also talk a lot about agriculture, to express the appreciation of my government for the Zambian official adherence to the next Expo, Milan Expo 2015. This edition of the Universal Exposition will be dedicated. The title is Feeding the Planet, Energy for Life. And I think that would be a good opportunity also for Zambia. Is an issue where Zambia has a lot to do, a lot to exchange with other partners to establish a real cooperation in that specific sector.
All right. Well, all very interesting. I do believe we will be getting a contribution from you right now. That is, of course, Ambassador Baudin from France. Now, we do have more to cover. Ambassador Baudin, your contribution to the panel discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, I wanted to return to the initial question that member states and the EU do come with the sectors where they have some value added, and where they see that it fits in the national planning in agreement with the authorities and various operators.
Right.
It also comes in the framework of a cooperation, division of labor among cooperating partners. And that's also an aspect that we should underline, that we are trying to not cross over the same path. For our part, France has been involved in the development of infrastructures, road, the Great East Road to Beira, electric transmission line and electric generation. Those infrastructures are prerequisite to the development of agriculture and to other sectors. I remember a chieftainess from the northwest actually explaining to me how pineapples were just rotting because on the spot, because there was no access to the road and then to the market.
All right.
So it's very important to keep in sight a global picture of infrastructure, both for transport, access to the market, but also for processing. And there I would like to come to the second aspect, where France, as you know, is quite an important agricultural producer. Agro-industry is one of our key sectors. And to come back to aid, because I've gone to trade and investment,
Right.
we come back to aid, just to say that things are complementary and that we are looking at things in a global perspective, because Zambia has reached that level of development where we can move beyond aid and can move forward. In that respect, AFDE, the Agence Française de Développement,
Right.
is exploring currently the way it could assist banks in financing small farmers.
So as Ambassador, have you mentioned earlier, it's more grants than handouts, isn't it?
No, it's loans in this particular case,
Okay.
concessional loans to assist small farmers to accede to banks and financing.
Okay, all right.
And I think it's very important to give people the means of an autonomous development.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right, all very interesting. And to you, Ambassador Hevio, now we have definitely heard about the consensus when it comes to infrastructure, the infrastructure that is needed in Zambia, the infrastructure that will be beneficial. Zambians know this, the European delegation knows this, the member states know this. But what of your collective views when it comes to maintaining matters such as democracy, also a very wide aspect? What is the European Union doing to help maintain democracy in Zambia?
Of course, democracy is in the end of Zambia, not in our hands. What only we can do is to support Zambia when we have some requests.
Right.
Let's take the example of the last election. We have been requested by the President Banda at that time to have missions, electoral missions, European electoral missions, with all member states involved, which allow maybe to increase confidence on the result of this election. And we have seen this in many parts of the world, that there are suspicions sometimes on election, and to have foreigners, including us, being part of the monitoring of this is something which is helpful. But we are doing a little bit more. We are supporting ECZ. We are supporting training for the police. We are supporting training for civil society organizations to help to reinforce the credibility of elections. And we are in a country where hopefully elections are one of the very strengths of this country, and we have seen a very beautiful election. But it's still to be maintained, it's still a challenge, and we are committed also for the next election, for example, to be there and to support the government. We are not only providing aid, we are also providing having interaction with the government, not only with the government, but with civil society, with political party, and we have the opportunity to share our views on the evolution of the situation. And when we believe that there is a trend on violence, there is a risk of this country moving into something which is not expected by the population, we are in a dialogue with the government, but also with various parts of the
Okay, and we'll be talking about evolution and even predictions, if you will, when it comes to the next 50 years and beyond for Zambia, and of course what your missions hope to achieve in your presence here. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be returning. We're going to take a short break, and so far it has definitely been a very interesting discussion, especially when it comes to issues such as prioritization, and we would also like to find out more when it comes to their views of Zambia in the future as we celebrate our 50 years. Good evening and welcome back to our panel discussion. Joining us is the EU member states representatives as well as the EU head of delegation. Now, we have been taking a look at the involvement, the collaborative efforts, as well as the cooperation, especially given into account that Zambia is celebrating 50 years of independence. And of course, partnerships have been developed and partnerships continue to be maintained. Let's take a look at what our panelists have to say with regards to various topics. Now, one topic that runs continuously when it comes to this year and this period, or this season, if you will, when it comes to trade and aid is, I guess it is a question in itself, from aid to trade. Why is that a debate to begin with? And why has the EU and its member states decided to implement the same strategy that it is currently running when it comes from aid to trade? Let's discuss that. We will start with you, Ambassador Baudin. What does from aid to trade, mean to you?
Yes, thank you very much. Actually, moving from aid to trade is also showing that Zambia has moved up in its own development. It has already achieved quite a lot and is no longer only on the recipient side, but is an actor, is a partner, and the world in its globalization implies that we all exchange together. We try to develop our areas of specialization and quality value addition. That is the way forward. As you know, in the World Bank classification, and despite the UN own assessment, Zambia has now entered into the classification or the category of lower middle income countries. From there, the assistance that is usually given to LDCs on very favorable terms is no longer really applicable to Zambia. It remains with some of those countries which are still a way back or who still have to develop.
So there has to be some change in the way relations are conducted, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's where we are encouraging the private sector to invest, to come in and propose its own creation of enterprises, creation of jobs, and we also encourage very strongly the regional integration, in particular through COMESA, SADC, and we interact both nationally and through the EU in particular. We are also giving assistance to Zambia to develop its capacity to trade, to develop its norms, and so on. One question that remains of interest and where we are having sometimes some bilateral debate is the climate of the affairs, environment, climate, where we understand from companies, European, French companies, whichever, that predictability is a key factor, that they expect a form of stability in the regulations, allowing for change and evolution, but in partnership, in a dialogue and consultation.
Okay.
So that's where we have been moving. Now, this all comes in a framework which is the framework of governance, which is quite crucial for the development of countries. And Zambia has been faring quite well as compared to many countries on the African continent. Yet, I think for most of us, there is some scope to go further, to ensure the political stability of the country, freedom of expression, freedom of the opposition, of NGOs and various operators, in order to ground dialogue as a normal practice of democracy, as opposed to some forms of political violence that we have seen
Well, that's a very valid point. I mean, if we are to talk about trade, and if trade is supposed to invite the globe, so to say, to take a look and to invest in Zambia and to cooperate with Zambia, both the private sector as well as the government, it is very, very crucial that good governance acts as probably the biggest invitation. And I'm sure you have something to say about that when it comes to governance. High Commissioner Thornton, what do you have to say about that?
No, I think that's absolutely right. I think you were talking about from aid to trade. The thing to understand is that Zambia's economy is growing very fast. As Ambassador Bourdin said, Zambia is now a low middle income country.
Right.
The total aid given by the whole of the donor community, including multilateral agencies, to Zambia accounts for a little more than 3% of Zambia's total production. That's around about 1/30th of Zambia's total production. So we're trying to do our bit to support Zambia, but ultimately the decisions that Zambia makes will determine Zambia's own future. And those decisions seem to me to fall into two categories. There are the decisions about the way it conducts itself politically, and I think it's very good that Zambia has a strong democratic record, one of the stronger ones in Africa up to now. We've seen 2 democratic transfers of power where political parties have lost elections and have given up power. That's a crunch for any democracy. And the UK has supported the election processes.
Right.
But democracy is in fact about a lot more than elections. It's about how people are able to conduct themselves and the ability to express themselves.
Well, this
between
brings about
elections.
human rights issues. Let's talk a bit about that.
Well, and so I think it's important that Zambians continue to be able to speak their minds about political as well as other issues, and that the press should be free to report them, and that Zambians should be able to continue to meet peacefully, of course, with whom they wish, in order to express their views.
All right.
But so there are political choices that Zambia has to make, but there are also economic and commercial choices that Zambia has to make. There is a worldwide competition for investment, and Zambia has to create the right sort of environment to attract foreign investment, but also to help local companies grow and prosper. Little SMEs grow into big companies, so that there can be wealth creation here. And so the trade and investment side is very important. And we are in London. We're likely to be holding a big investment conference on Zambia later on this year. We hope that senior government ministers will go to promote the opportunities that there are here in Zambia. And in the High Commission, we are increasing our staff in order to do more to promote the trade investment opportunities that do exist here to British businesses.
All right, well, very interesting. Ambassador O'Brien, from aid to trade, I'm going to ask a very direct question that I'm sure a lot of our viewers would like to know. Are we on track when it comes to the evolution from aid to trade?
Thanks very much, G. I think that when we look at this issue from aid to trade, my 2 colleagues have just raised the issue about how the economy in Zambia has been growing. But one of the very big challenges for Zambia is that despite the growth, the economic growth, we're still seeing real poverty in the country, and there's a real divide. And I think that's why the whole issue of development cooperation is still important and needs to be focused on areas such as the most vulnerable and how to move people forward to be able to benefit from that economic growth.
Right.
So for example, in the case of Ireland, in our own historical development, we've put huge emphasis on education. This is for our own development over the past 50 years. And that's why we see ourselves continuing to invest in education here in Zambia, and we see that form of cooperation will continue. So it's not as if development cooperation will disappear and that we'll move over to trade, but we'll try to focus it in a way that's appropriate to the stage that Zambia is at, but still recognizing that poverty is a huge issue here in Zambia. I think in terms of trade, certainly we want to see increased trade between Zambia and the European Union, in our case between Zambia and Ireland directly as well, and we look at where the opportunities are, both for strengthening the environment here in Zambia so that the situation is right in terms of what needs to be in place for proper trade, but also looking at the opportunities and looking at it in that way and seeing that our relationship will develop over time. So certainly we do see that even in terms of our own bilateral relationships, it will move as not just a development cooperation relationship, which is how we started probably, but will take on other dimensions, including strong trade and business linkages.
Okay. Now, Ambassador Antonin, I will ask you this next question, still on the topic of from aid to trade. What are some of the potential success stories that you are actually predicting? And can Zambia actually achieve its goal of its Millennium Development Goals and, of course, its overall goal of poverty eradication, poverty reduction from aid to trade? Does this actually look like it's something feasible?
Thanks, Chief, for giving me this easy one. Yeah, may I first say that we are now, in terms of EU and Zambia partnership, I think we are stepping into a new era, and that's because of the what is earlier said about the rapid economic growth in the country. I think Zambia is in a big economic transition thanks to this growth in the recent past, and Zambia has now more resources of its own, to do things and so on. So, what is our role in future, and can we turn this aid to a new kind of partnership?
Right.
That's a big question, actually, and it's actually what we are asking now. We tried to approach this issue actually last year when there was a very unique visit by two Finnish ministers, tandem visit. We brought our Minister for Development here and also together with our Minister of Trade, Foreign Trade. So there's two ministers same time here, and we had a 1 week kind of Finnish Business Week and other events there, trying to actually elaborate this question: what is this transition from aid to trade?
Right.
And there were no easy answers actually, because obviously the business, companies, they do their own business, they want to make profit and see what are the opportunities. But we had one particular exercise in the Copper Belt, actually northwest in Lumbwana, because in Zambia there are so many of those very rapidly growing small towns or villages becoming actually major settlements of towns. Lumbwana, one of those. And we brought 30 Finnish companies and other institutions to Lumbwana for 3 days to sit down there with local stakeholders and try to come up with ideas what the Finnish businesses can do, even without aid money. Is there some solutions that they can bring in? And to my knowledge, there are some concrete ideas now coming out, and one is, for instance, that there is a Finnish company who is aiming at setting up a low-cost housing production unit in the area to help, because people are living in shanties,
Right.
So that is something, and hopefully without our aid money, because things could and should happen without somebody just chipping in, free money, and obviously that kind of smart partnerships, I think in the future we really have to think about added value. What is the role of the traditional partners in Zambia? And we may not have really yet figured it out, but I think the future is this kind of smart partnership between businesses, between institutions, also people-to-people relations in more than in the past, university, being active here, in terms of partnership.
Now, just for the sake of our audience, what would you describe as a smart partnership? I mean, we've talked trade, but within trade itself, some people feel as though free trade and policies that are there to protect even developing nations against maybe the potential risk of being exploited through a capitalistic system and things like that. So what would you describe as smart partnership?
This is a very tricky question, but I think that we never talk about partnerships. We have to think about how we go to more equal partnerships. I think there are win-win situations, and those we have to very carefully elaborate. Maybe like like again, we have a program, regional program, supporting the systems of innovations, because innovations is something which I think is a bit of a area in Africa, not only in Zambia, that there has to be more innovations, because without innovations there is very little to trade, beyond whatever minerals and so on. So what we are trying to do within this regional program, we are trying to actually create those partnerships between Finnish institutions, the Zambian and the regional institutions, to come up and strengthen the system of innovations, whether it's in the companies. We can assist companies to be more innovative here in Zambia, but also research institutions, some of the university partners and so on. So this may be one of those little examples that what we think could be useful, but to bring private businesses, private people, private business preference, corporate preference, that's very important.
All right, certainly is important. And the Italian government has also made important contributions towards this partnership. We've talked about this evolution from aid to trade. How is Italy being a player with regards to implementing this and making it a reality?
Yeah, first of all, let me mention that the entry into force of the bilateral investment promotion and protection agreement last February. Together with my counterpart, the Zambian ambassador in Rome, we already organized a two-country presentation of Zambia to Italy, and the interest manifested by Italian companies to Zambia is very, very high. But let me give you just very few data. Data normally are very boring, but in this case are very meaningful regarding the exchange between Italy and Zambia. While the Italian imports from Zambia are pretty stable and regard copper products, sugar, stone and precious metals, it's impressive to observe the increase of in which sector the imports from Italy, the Zambia imports from Italy has grown from 2012. So, regarding machinery and mechanical equipment, plus 59%. Electrical machinery and parts, plus 179%. Vehicles, tractors and parts, plus 195%. So we are talking about instrumental tools, and that is a clear signal that the manufacturing sector in Zambia is moving on.
All right, all very interesting statistics there, but what environment needs to be created as Zambia to achieve a situation where we progress from aid to trade? No doubt it is a progression, is why the member states and the delegation feel that this is the next stage Zambia needs to take, particularly after 50 years of independence. So what is the ideal environment for achieving this? Ambassador Fink from Germany, I will ask that question to you.
We're talking about from aid to trade, we're talking about development, we're talking about governance and human rights. I think we have to make clear to ourselves that these are not separate issues. They are interlinked. Right. As Kofi Annan once put it, no peace without development, no development without peace, and neither peace nor development without respect for human rights, democracy, good governance, rule of law. Okay. So whatever we are doing is a contribution to the other sectors here.
And how is Zambia faring with regards to that?
Well, as Ambassador and High Commissioner Thornton pointed out, there are a couple of issues where Zambia really can serve as a best practice case to other parts of the continent. Okay. Democratic transfer of powers, hospitality towards refugees, freedom of religion and belief, and Zambia deserves a lot of commendation for what has been doing here in this country. But there are other aspects, like the French ambassador pointed out, where some question marks have arisen. Freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, these kind of things, and I think we can do more in order to preserve Zambia's excellent reputation, which it had enjoyed so far in the past 50 years.
All right. So Ambassador Fink saying that we can do more. But what is your prediction? Are we going to get there? Ambassador Lina, I'll ask you that one.
Of course you're going to get there. Of course.
Well, that's encouraging. I mean,
nation building is a continuous effort.
Right.
And I think about the conference that we had together with Zambia last year about entrepreneurship, innovation. Why was that area picked? It was picked because it gave us a level playing field. It gave us the opportunity to create this new partnership. Entrepreneurship you need to work on here, we need to work on it in Sweden. And the same goes for the issues that my colleagues have been discussing about democracy, about freedom of speech. Those are issues that we have to be working on all the time. All society is not specific to Zambia or specific to Sweden. Those are based on those common values that we share about how democracies and how relations should work. I would like to you have been asking everyone about from aid to trade,
right.
And I think that what my German colleague just said, that these are interlinked. It's not aid or trade. It's not aid as a trade as a contradiction to aid. These are definitely interlinked, and there can be roles to play for aid when it comes to facilitating trade,
Right.
in some ways, so that trade, as I was mentioning, actually the economic growth can also have an impact on the poorest person. I said I want to tell you about Agnes.
Well, which is why I said let's talk about those success stories, because
Let's
off
talk about
air you
Agnes.
did tell me about some of those success stories. Go ahead.
Agnes, she was very upset at us in a work lab that we had at this conference. She said, why is it that in this country of mine, you always say that just because we live on the countryside we're poor? Or just because I'm a woman, head of household, I'm poor? I manage a business on myself, Agnes said. A business where I actually provide agriculture input to more than 1,000 small-scale farmers.
Wow.
And she does that because there has been this facilitation so that the big companies can see that, okay, there is a market out there. So those are the kind of things that can be done. So I think it's aid and trade. Why do we have had 3 delegations of Swedish companies in health and life sciences coming to Zambia. 3 delegations in 1 year. Why? Because Sweden has worked together with Zambia for 40 years in the area of health.
Right.
So these things are definitely linked together. I think that the new partnerships, they have to be on a level playing field. They have to be these areas where we can share. Where we can share, be it values or where we can share challenges. I think that ICT is another of those areas. We have learned a lot about ICT. In the mid-90s, there were no mobile phone users in sub-Saharan Africa. Today, there are 360 million. The consumer is now deciding what should happen with the mobile phones. We saw the development when the producers were the ones deciding. Let me just finish, because I like that phrase of yours when it comes to aid to trade and the relation and the interlinkages between all these areas in a society.
Yeah.
When you said that good governance acts maybe as the biggest invitation to companies.
Right.
I completely agree. I think that is very important for all of us in all of our countries to remember that these things go together.
All right. I might patent that phrase, by the way, for the sake of trade and export
We'll get
it.
on Twitter. Go on Twitter.
All right. Well, to wrap up our discussion, Ambassador Hevio, where do you see Zambia 50 years from now?
Thank you very much. First, I think I will see Zambia within regional integration, not with heavy border as we can see now. When I see the trucks, at every border waiting for weeks, and when I see in Europe that we have not to stop to any border now, I see that this is a big challenge for this country, to be open and to move towards this regional integration. This is the future. You will not have in the future only a small country. You will need to have big organizations working together. And I see that we will continue to have exchanges, not aid, but exchanges. I hope that we will see investment from Europe to Zambia. Maybe in 50 years we will see investment from Zambia in Europe. That's what I expect from this country.
Right.
I hope that we will have trade, but I hope that most part of the trade will be within the region, which is very weak until now. That's the challenge of Zambia. So I'm very confident that this country, which has all the possibility for growth, land, water, minds. Will succeed to address the big challenges now which is facing. Poverty reduction. We are still in a country where there is a lot of people which are extremely poor, which are in a very difficult position every day, which are not able to eat every day the 3 meals. So this is a big challenge for this country. I'm sure that Zambia will succeed to address this, but this is still to be done. Good governance, respect of human rights, there is a lot of commitment which has been done, still some challenge to implement them. So but I am sure that in 50 years we'll have another very interesting debate. Maybe in Europe with Zambian.
Certainly. Ladies and gentlemen, ambassadors, High Commissioner, heads of delegation represented, thank you very, very much once again for your time. And I would like to wish all of you on the panel, of course, a happy Europe Day. Is that what it's called? Europe Day? All right. So we'll be celebrating throughout the year, 50 years of independence, but that will definitely be your day. Mark the 9th of May on your calendar. Ladies and gentlemen, we do thank you very much for joining us. This has been hopefully an informative as well as interesting and somewhat entertaining panel discussion. Certainly for me, I hope it has been for you. Until we see each other next time, we wish you a pleasant evening and all the best as we celebrate Zambia's 50 years, and we continue to look forward to those cooperations as well as bilateral partnerships for the future. Take care and good evening.